Hey my little lovers of horror stories, today I've gathered some truly chilling encounters and crazy stalker stories straight from Reddit's LetsNotMeet. Get ready, settle in, and happy watching. Hello, Let's Not Meet. I'm a long-time lurker and first-time poster. After reading similar stories, I feel it's time I came forward with my own. Out of respect for everyone's privacy, names in this story will be changed. The important people to know are me and my cousin, who we'll call Drew. Some of the prominent neighborhood kids we'll call Josh, Kylie, and Evan. And of course, Gabe. To set the story, this was around the time my mom and dad divorced. It wasn't a clean divorce, and there was a lot going on around this time. My mom had to move out of the school district and into a small home quickly, and my dad kept the house in our neighborhood. I bring this up to explain that although my two brothers decided to stay with my dad, me and my cousin, who lived with us most of his life, decided to move in with my mom. The issue was that my mom's new place wasn't within the school district, which meant no buses. So the setup was that she'd bring us to school before work, and after school, we would catch the bus to my dad's house and stay there for a couple of hours until she got off work. Now that everything is explained, let's get into what you're really here for. There were quite a few kids in our neighborhood, and I guess you could say we all got along and hung out quite a bit. We would all ride the bus together, hang out after school, and hell, even try to build forts in the moss. The moss was a spot in the woods you could access through a small opening at the end of a cul-de-sac. This is important for later. It was an everyday thing for us. Until one day, a new family had moved into the neighborhood, and with them was their son, Gabe. He had brown hair, and he was skinny. We first met Gabe on the school bus, and us being curious about a new kid in our neighborhood, we were all eager to talk to him. You'd probably think that we got some off vibe from him, or maybe something about him was creepy, but honestly, he just seemed like a regular kid. He seemed to fit in with the other kids in the neighborhood. It became normal to see me, Josh, Kylie, Drew, Evan, and Gabe hanging out, whether all of us or a combination of the few. After getting to know him, we learned that Gabe actually used to go to our school, but got expelled after he threw stuff at a teacher, and they had only just let him back into our school that school year. Back then, we brushed it off as something edgy he did, but knowing the events now, it should have been the first red flag. You see, Gabe, Drew, and I became close. I'd argue closer than the other kids. I would have considered him a friend instead of just another neighborhood kid to hang out with, which is why we didn't immediately drop him after the following events. I wasn't there for this, but I heard about it after the fact. Drew and I got on the bus one day, and immediately I noticed Gabe wasn't there. We sat next to each other every day on the bus. I just assumed he was absent, and Drew decided to sit by me. Kylie and Evan, who sat near us, started talking about something that happened, and we joined their conversation. Apparently, not long after Drew and I left to go to my mom's, Gabe had invited Kylie, Evan, and Josh to his house. Now I don't remember what set this in motion, or what really happened, but the hangout ended with Gabe chasing Josh home, with a knife in his hands. Josh lived on the other side of the neighborhood, and once he got home, his mother came out to see what was going on, as she heard him yelling for her from the front yard. When she stepped out, Gabe chased both of them inside. The scariest part? They heard from Josh that he was laughing and had a smile on his face as he did it, like he enjoyed terrorizing them. The cops were called, and honestly, I don't know what came out of that other than Gabe was gone from school for a few days after that. When he came back, he acted like it never happened. The kids in our neighborhood started growing apart from Gabe after that, especially Josh, who I actually never saw talk to him again. I mean, who would blame him? I guess I felt bad for Gabe a little bit. My stupid brain must have decided it was a bad prank that went too far, or something like that. Oh, how dumb was I? I truly believe Gabe changed after that, like something had clicked in his brain. Not long after that, We were on the bus, and I was talking to him as we sat in the same seats. All of a sudden, he just pulled a pencil out and tried to stab me with it. Not only tried, but he did stab me in the neck. Luckily, it only broke the skin, but it shocked me. He laughed like he was joking, and I decided to move seats. When I got off, I felt the need to explain what happened to the bus driver. I never should have done that. I believe, to this day, that one choice caused what happened next. He was kicked off the bus for a couple of days. When he returned, they made him sit at the front of the bus. He knew it was me who snitched on him. When I'd walk past him to get off the bus, he would glare at me, and it felt evil. He called me names and a snitch, and I was scared of him. Fast forward a week later, and all the kids in our neighborhood just decided that they wouldn't hang out with Gabe anymore. And I wish I could say the same. Even after everything I had just spilled to you all, I was naive and dumb. Eventually, he messaged me apologizing and asked if Drew and I wanted to hang out. I don't know why, but we agreed. I think I remembered him saying that he and some other kids were gonna hang out in the moss and build some forts. And I think that's why we agreed, because other kids would be there. So we set off to meet him at his house, which was just down the street from ours. We knocked on his door, and he answered it, holding a knife. Screw the red flag. I was ignoring a whole red alarm at this point. It was a kitchen knife with some sort of orange handle. With a smile on his face, he held his arm up and just started cutting himself. We should have just left there. Why didn't we just leave? After a couple of cuts, he laughed, like it was some sort of joke. It wasn't until now that I realized this kid was psychotic, like something was really wrong with him. He had a couple of tools with him and told us to follow him to the moss, and for some dumb reason, we did. I was holding out hope that he'd be normal when all the other kids would be there. We got to the small opening to the moss and walked in. To get to the small pond in the moss, you had to go down a slightly steep hill and through the brush, and you'd be there. I bet you could imagine my surprise when I realized nobody else was there. I looked at Gabe, who just chuckled. "They must be late. Let's just get started," he said to me. Both Drew and I were on edge, and I bet Gabe could feel it. "Hey, OP, go find some sticks and logs to build the fort," he told me. He pointed over towards the pond. I obeyed and made my way over to the area. About 10 or 15 seconds after I started walking, I just got the feeling to turn around, and I'll never, ever stop thanking God for doing just that. Gabe was there, creeping up to my cousin who was picking up a large rock. Gabe had a hoe-looking tool in his hand, raising it slowly. I shouted, "Hey!" towards them. My cousin jolted up, and Gabe quickly lowered the hoe and looked at me in confusion. I ran up to them, telling them my mom messaged me and that it was time to go. This was a lie. My phone only worked on Wi-Fi at the time. I felt that Gabe knew that I saw him, so I grabbed my cousin, who didn't question me for a second, and we quickly started leaving. And at that moment, he chased us. We booked it through the woods for a solid half a minute and got to the steep part, quickly climbing up it. I looked back and saw Gabe, with the face I could only describe as a psychopath's, still chasing us. I prayed that we wouldn't slip or fall, and thank God we didn't. Luckily, Gabe struggled a little bit, giving us time to bolt out of the entrance. We ran halfway up the street and turned around. Gabe wasn't there. In fact, we never saw him leave. We went home, and the next day we told some of the other kids what happened. The weirdest part is, though, we never saw Gabe again. Not on the bus or at school. Very shortly after, his parents moved from that house. My dad moved out of that neighborhood a year later, and my mom found a newer house in our school district. This was years ago. I recently looked Gabe up to see whatever happened to him, but nothing came up. No Facebook page, no Instagram, nothing. It's like he just vanished. Like he never even existed in the first place. But I know he did. I don't live anywhere near there anymore, and thank God for that. Gabe, I don't know where you are or what happened to you, but let's agree to never freaking meet again. My family has houses both in Mexico and Texas, so I alternate between the USA and Mexico very frequently. On normal weeks, I just cross the border from Mexico to Texas to go to school, and then I come back to Mexico. I spend most of my time in Mexico, so naturally, I am quite used to cartel presence. I'm used to calling off nights out with friends due to cartel-related shootings, stuff like that. It just no longer surprises me. It wasn't until recently that I had an actual face-to-face encounter with the cartel. My ex-girlfriend lives in Mexico, in a gated neighborhood on the wealthier side of the city. Naturally, I used to frequent her house when we were still together. One night, her parents left her and her little brother alone until the next day, so she invited me over, and we got pretty hammered. Around 2 a.m., we went out for a walk because we wanted to smoke some weed from Texas. We sat at the bleachers of a basketball court within her neighborhood, which was behind a very, very beautiful house with expensive cars parked outside. I asked her, "What do they do?" To which she replied, "Maña," which is slang for cartel. I thought she was joking until she told me how the Mexican army had their whole neighborhood on lockdown because of them back in Tulsa. My smile faded so fucking fast. I got kind of mad and worried, and I asked her, "What the fuck are we doing behind a cartel safe house at 2 a.m. smoking foreign weed?" This all happened quickly, and after about 5 minutes of being there, a tall white pickup truck parked in front of the court. I immediately knew this wasn't good news and kept telling her we should leave. She told me to calm down and that it was probably just some kids making out in the truck. That seemed reasonable to me, but I started panicking after the truck just stayed there for like 5 minutes without turning off the engine. As soon as we got up to leave, it took off. As we made our way to the other street, the huge weight that was lifted from my shoulders fell right back, twice as heavy when the truck intercepted us at the very corner of the street. She ran into a house that was still under construction. She tried to pull me with her, but I didn't budge because something I've learned from my dad being a cop is you never run if you have nothing to hide. She had the weed, I didn't, so I just stood there for a bit. Then the window of the driver's side went down, and a man signaled me to get closer. And so I did. As I walked up, the first thing I saw was that both of the men in there were armed. This made my stomach drop. The passenger looked completely out of his mind, like he genuinely looked unhinged. His pupils were fucking huge. He was clearly tripping on something. On the other hand, the driver looked like a pretty normal guy. I dare to say he was so normal, it was comforting. He asked me what we were doing. This whole conversation was in Spanish, of course. I said, "Smoking." He asked, "Smoking what?" I said, "Just normal cigarettes." He turned to look at his partner and back at me, and there was a long pause before I said, "I don't know who you are looking for, but it's definitely not us. I'm not even from here." He asked me if I was American, to which I nodded. Then he said, "Show me." Fortunately, I always carry my passport with me since I cross the border so often. He asked me about my girlfriend. I said she was American too, she's not, and he told me to go get her. I told him I'd rather not, because if they found weed on her that wasn't theirs, she would be so fucked. Fortunately, the guy didn't insist. After going through my phone, he told me he didn't want to see us out this late behind that house ever again. They took off, and I turned back to her, who was peeking from behind a pile of cement bags. I signaled her that we were leaving, and we ran back to her house. When we got to her front yard, I asked her to give me the weed so I could get rid of it. She told me she hid it under the floorboards of the construction house. We ran back to get it because if they found it there, we would be so fucked. The 2 minutes it took for us to run back and then return to her house were easily the scariest moments of my life. What still makes my stomach turn to this day is the look the other guy had on his face. I'm telling you, he looked absolutely unhinged. He did not say a single thing but was staring me down the whole time, his hand around the grip of the rifle. I felt like he was just itching for me to say the wrong thing so he could blow my brains out right then and there. This happened about a year or so ago, but I just read something fairly similar, and it reminds me how it still gives me the chills. I have 3 kids who were around 9, 7, and 2 at the time, and also living with my husband. We live fairly rural in the UK, just on the outside of a small village. Every night I always check the door is locked, and sometimes even the chain put across as well. This night I was woken up very abruptly by a very harsh banging on the front door. At first I thought it was just someone drunk thinking it was their house, but they started trying to turn the handle. My husband wasn't near to the door, and I stood on the stairs with my phone in case I needed to call someone. My husband told the man he had kids in here that were sleeping and to go away right now. The man started rambling and slightly slurring. It wasn't extreme slurring, but his voice wasn't quite right. Seemed clear he was either on something or mentally unwell. He kept asking for a certain woman's name, and my husband told him that there was no woman with that name here, to go away now. The man kept saying we were hiding her, and he was coming in. During this period, there was a lot of very strange sounds coming from behind the door. Thumping, scratching, and another sound I couldn't quite place. My husband then told him that I had called the police. He did a few more frantic thumps then, I assume, left, because we heard nothing else. We heard nothing else like him attempting this with the neighbors either. For a few hours I waited in case he came back. I had a tennis racket I'd have used if I had had to. Luckily, it didn't come to that. In the morning, as it was a weekend day, I decided to check outside, and honestly, I did feel a little ill. There was a massive dent in the door, which I thought surely a fist alone wouldn't have caused. Then on the door and the panels near the door were fingernail marks and blood. It wasn't a massive amount, but enough that it needed to be washed off. Took pictures first though. Between the door and where the bins were was a smashed ashtray, also with blood on it and in lots of pieces. One of the outdoor plants had also been tipped out, so plant and soil all over the floor. My best guess is he tried to smash with the ashtray and cut himself, but that's merely speculation. My blood ran cold how clearly aggressive this man was, and we have absolutely no reason to be targeted. We told our neighbors, who were absolutely horrified. They said they thought they heard something, but thought it was a drunk. When we mentioned the woman's name, the neighbor said, "Oh gosh, that's last few doors down from us, who used to live where we do. She used to be into drugs and a few shady people, and the neighbor reckons maybe one of her old drug-taking companions was searching for her. Even now there have been a few incidents in her house where police have been called, but I'm not sure what for. Now we have a video doorbell and alarms fitted, so at least now a button goes straight to a security system that if you don't answer, will send the authorities. It didn't end in danger, but it so easily could have done, and that's scary as hell. So seriously, she doesn't live here, and you're absolutely insane door-knocking guy? Please let's not meet." This happened a couple years ago, and I never figured out what the hell was really going on. I was staying with my mom for 2 months over the summer, helping her get settled after my dad passed. She'd just moved out of the house I grew up in and into a new suburb. Seemed like a really safe neighborhood, just normal houses and people who mostly kept to themselves. One night I'm just watching TV in the living room. Mom had gone to bed already. I hear a knock at the back door. Not the front, the back. I just sat there for a second, like, did I actually hear that? Because who knocks on a back door? The porch light was off, so I couldn't see anything, and they weren't knocking again, just dead quiet. Eventually, I got up and went to check, flipped the light on, and there's this guy standing there on the back patio, mid-40s, kinda average looking, grey hoodie and jeans, hands in his pockets, just standing there, not looking at me, just staring at the ground. I didn't open the door, obviously. I was just like, Can I help you? He just had this really creepy demeanor. Took way too long to respond to the question. When he finally looks up, it's real slow, and I don't know. His expression was just off. Kinda blank, but like he was trying really hard to look sober. He smiles at me through the patio door and goes, "Sorry, man, I think I left my jacket here." I just stared at him. 'Cause what? I tell him, "You got the wrong house." And then he does this thing where he tilts his head just a little like a dog when they hear a weird noise. And he's still smiling. But he doesn't answer, just stands there. After a few seconds, which I swear felt like minutes too long, he finally says, "Oh yeah, okay, my bad," and turns and walks away. I made a huge mistake here by immediately turning off the backlight. It didn't click right away, but the house had one of those old wood fence gates that creaks and latches real loud. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a sweat because I just realized I hadn't heard it. I went back and turned on the light, and I could see that it was still closed. He would have had to open it and shut it without me hearing, and I just don't think that could happen. So I tried to turn on the porch light to see if anyone was out there, but it doesn't turn on. I sat in the kitchen until the sun came up, just waiting for something to happen. Once it was light out, I went outside and checked the porch light. It had been unscrewed just enough so it wouldn't come on. We called the cops. They came by and looked around. They found that the wood on the front door was chipped up right around where the deadbolt is, as if someone was trying to pry the door open. They also found out from a neighbor that someone had been snooping around the backyard earlier in the day when my mom and I were out shopping. The worst part about this story is that there's no resolution. The guy never came back. Nothing weird ever happened again that my mom has noticed. I eventually had to leave, and she still lives in that house alone. This happened 5 years ago when I, 20, female, was 15. My great-aunt's health at the time was failing, and she could no longer care for herself, so my family decided that she was better off in a nursing home. Due to her being an extreme hoarder, I don't want to shit on my family in any way, but this is important for the story. Her house was left abandoned. My father and I were the only ones that checked on the house from time to time. It started off small when we noticed minor stuff being moved around or drawers being looked through. Around that time, we didn't think much of it since another person close to my great-aunt also had a key to the house, and we thought maybe he wanted to get some of his stuff, as he used to live with her for some time. After a while, probably a month later, things got stranger. We started spending more time roaming the house to rescue some things in it and just to look through everything. Maybe after a week of doing so and feeling watched every time we were there, more stuff was moved around and placed so we would notice it immediately, like stuffed animals that used to sit on a shelf, now neatly sitting one above another on the staircase, step by step. We also found dirty footprints and more drawers ripped open with the stuff inside spilled everywhere. We got very suspicious of the situation and investigated more. We had late-night drives passing the house just to check if we ever caught a flashlight or any sign of someone being inside the house every night. At that time, I started telling my friends about the situation, and as the stupid kids we were back then, we thought it would be a good adventure for us to just stay there for a night, playing security guards with the mission to finally catch this person that seemed almost like a ghost to us. Another piece of information that's important is that there was actually no obvious way inside the house. No windows were open, all doors were locked, and we and this other guy were the only ones with a key. Anyways, back to the day we stayed there. Me and 3 of my friends just settled into the kitchen, not noticing anything out of the ordinary, yet except for the normal stuff that had been going on. So we assumed that they weren't around yet. We ordered pizza and just talked for a while, just waiting for something to happen. After a while, we decided that we would go for a walk with my 2 dogs that I had with me. I made sure to definitely close and lock the door behind me. When we returned after 15 minutes, a single lamp in the last corner of the living room was turned on. Keep in mind the whole living room was filled with trash, so they would have had to climb over everything just to turn this lamp on. That's when we knew the person had to be in the house now. We decided to go into the kitchen and keep a low profile just to see what would happen. After a while, one of my friends, let's call her Jane, chickened out and wanted to go home, so we let her. Just 5 minutes after Jane closed the front door behind her, we heard someone walking down the wooden stairs, obviously thinking we had all left the house. We were so caught up listening to the creaking of the steps that we only realized what was actually happening when one of my dogs started barking, and the footsteps immediately stopped. There was only one wall separating us from whoever just came walking down the stairs. When we finally realized that, we all got so scared and ran out of the house as fast as possible. There was a door separating the staircase from the hallway that we luckily locked as soon as we came back from the walk, so we probably locked them up there. When we finally all sat outside the house, we just decided that it was probably best if we just called the police and let them handle the situation. As we waited, basically all holding our breath in the aftershock of the situation, we suddenly heard someone, a male voice, talking quietly, probably on the phone. That's when we noticed that a window was slightly open on the second story of the house. He must have opened it at one point because, as I said, no windows were ever open. We couldn't really make out anything that was being said, only something along the lines of, "been caught." After 30 long minutes of sitting there, the police finally arrived and went inside. They looked through everything but found nothing. He surely had enough time to simply hide somewhere. There was a room completely filled with cardboard boxes that reached up to the roof. That's when things got extreme. It was like he was playing mind games with us. He left notes everywhere in the house for us to find, with weird, drawn-on smiley faces and flowers, saying, "Catch me." He placed this alarm thing under the front door that would go off anytime someone entered, letting him know that someone was there. He trashed the bedroom so it was beyond recognition, destroying furniture, shitting into the toilet and placing a flower on top of the shit, and all this without ever being caught once. Our checkups became more frequent, turning from once a day to every hour, but nothing. We eventually decided to let things cool down a little and ignored the problem for a while. At one point, he would leave an basically unlivable house drowning in cat pee and trash. Right? Nope. Wrong. Probably 4 months after we hadn't paid much attention to him or the house, one of my friends said that he saw some figure standing at the window behind the curtain, just staring outside. We were just like, "Great, here we go again." And suddenly the interest was back. One day, we all decided to turn up at the house. There were 7 of us, and we were just ready to search that damn house from head to toe, just to find the place that guy was hiding and how he was leaving and entering that house. Still, everything was locked. When we first got back inside, there was leftover and rotten food in the kitchen, and a surprise for us in the living room where he had shit on a cardboard box, just like some fucking dog. We decided to separate. 4 of us went inside the living area, one of my friends stayed outside, and a friend, let's call him Carl, and I went into the stable area of the house. That part had a hole in the wall that connected the place the hay was kept, the hayloft, to the attic. But we were never able to figure out where exactly that hole in the attic was. Carl was throwing little stones at the hole, which seemed to be covered with something like cardboard from the other side, just so our friends would be able to hear the sound from inside to find the entrance. All of a sudden, it knocked back. We actually saw the cardboard bending from someone hitting it, and I yelled down to my friend outside if they were finally able to find that damn entrance. All I got back from her was, "No, everyone is downstairs." Just kinda shocked, Carl and I quickly made our way out of the stable and to the others, saying that if we went to the attic now, we'd get him, since there would be no way he could escape that quickly, and he would have had to pass us on the stairs. We all ran upstairs, but again, nothing. Just nothing at all. After this, we just decided that we would give up and not go there again. We also realized that it might be too dangerous. He never seriously did anything to us except for creeping us out, but we were wondering what he would do if we seriously caught him and stood in front of him. Our parents were also not really happy with us doing any of this. So again, months passed without anything, only sometimes driving by and seeing a faint light inside, until the house was finally put on the market to be sold. Today, it has been completely emptied out and is being renovated. So to the creep living in a completely rancid house for almost a year, let's not meet.